Okay, so for drywall mudding, again, the priority is to get that first coat on so they can dry. But what I like to use is the +3 joint compound, a light joint compound. It's easy to sand, doesn't have as much dust, it's not really hard to use. But you always want to, when you open up the bucket, you want to mix it and so that it has a nice consistency. So I always just take a sponge, just add just a little bit of water. You don't want to add too much. And just take a mixer. Bit on your corner of your trowel and just smooth it, basically run it across. And on the other side as well. So I'm just cutting this just to get a small amount. Now I just like to use paper tape. And you scrape off the excess. That's about all you need. You just want basically you don't want to see the purple anymore, so, and it doesn't really matter how much you really get in there because you're going to be basically wiping it all off anyways. Go against the ceiling first. Seems to be easier to get that to crease into the corner. Okay, so then in this corner, you don't have to go all the way down because base trim is, or the trim for the door is going to go straight up against the wall, so you don't even have to finish that corner. You just got to finish the top part where it's going to be seen. And while I'm at it, I'm going to do that straight seam here. Okay, so we'll get this big seam. So this, I just take a full amount and I just glide it over. So it's kind of a two-step process. Just get a full amount on there and feather it out. So feather it, put it on there, feather it out. Now we go about midway to feather this out. Because you can see how that kind of bubbles up. You want to just keep pushing it until it slides all the way out. Okay, so then on the screws, I just take like a half a trowel full and I just slide them straight over both of them. It's easier to make this motion than separate ones. So sometimes you see screws poking like through here. Got to put a little bit more tension on them. And same here. Just go over both of those screws there. And I wouldn't really worry too much about the edges of the drywall because we're going to be addressing waterproofing there. So this little area needs patched here. So just get a little piece here. So when you're done with your bucket of mud, make sure you wipe out all the crusties around here, because all of that will do is just get hard around the edges and just fall into your mud, and then you'll be really annoyed by trying to get them out of there. So just clean your bucket up well. What is that? All right. Okay, so second coat of drywall, or drywall mud, doing the second coat. You would definitely want to try to get this done on day 4, because there's always imperfections that you have to keep going back for before you can paint. So try to definitely do that on day 4. Really, I just always just go over with a real light sponge, just knocked on some of the heavy stuff. You don't have to don't over sand it, just get it enough just to get some of the crumbly stuff off of there. And then we'll apply the second coat. Second coat. So again, you're just putting a half trowel of mud on, and I always do the ceiling for my second coat first. Just seems to be a little bit easier, but you just coat this joint and then just feather it out. Usually 1 or 2 passes is about all you want to do. If you do anything more than that, you're just taking too much off. And if you streak like this on the bottom wall, don't worry about that. The next morning you can just scrape that off. So don't even try to touch that corner, just leave it alone. It'll be easier to take care of tomorrow. Yeah, so you're basically, the second coat's just doing one side of the corner and then the main seams. So you're not trying to get both coated at the same time. They do make corner trowels, but I've never had any success with that. You always have too much mud using them. That's why it's easier to take 3 coats. Honestly, and it's almost 4 coats really, because the amount of touch-ups that you end up having, it's almost like another coat. So, all right, and then for the main seams, I use a 10-inch knife and a 12-inch knife. So I apply it with the 10, scrape it off with the 12. All right, and then just cut the corners. That allows you to spread it more evenly. So you just apply the mud with the 10-inch. You're almost putting too much mud on there. And then with your 12-inch, you basically just apply quite a bit of pressure. Just smooth it out. Don't worry about the bubbles. The third coat is to take care of that. And just leave it alone. You can sand some of that up, and then some of the bubbles that come out you can play with tomorrow. Okay, so just apply it with a 10-inch. and scrape it off with the, yep, there's a little line in there. Just leave it alone. There's something there, but you could try to play around with it. I mean, you can do the whole joint over again. If you got something in there, it's not the end of the world. But the more you play with it, the less likely you're going to get a good result. And then that little thing, that can be sanded off real easily. And then I just take my 10-inch knife for these holes and just put a thicker bead on it. So just okay, so over the Schluter edging that's coming over here, you can just simply just mud it like as if it was a piece of drywall tape. And I kind of like this for a couple of reasons. One, it's waterproof, all, you know, everything underneath the towel and over, but also it kind of builds it up a little bit so you don't have too much of a, you know, if you have a space out end of your tile, it makes it nice and it makes a nice joint. All right, and any of this stuff hanging on, I would just leave alone. That can just be addressed after it dries. Okay, so then on the fourth coat, I like to use some Easy Sand 5-minute mud. And this is just to touch up some of the bubbles and imperfections. And it just allows you to be able to paint all in the same day. So just mix that up into a loose consistency. And then you can apply that just like regular joint compound. Great thing is I'll be able to sand it within about 20 minutes or so. So that was the joint that I primarily needed that 5-minute mud for, was the waterproofing joint between the tile and the drywall. And what I'm doing here is called wet sanding. So I'm just using a white scrubby pad and just basically sanding it with that sponge. And then the rest of the bathroom, you want to wipe down all the walls with a sponge so that you can remove all of that dust. That's going to be really important in order to get a nice primer coat on this drywall, is to take all that drywall dust off. Okay, so we're just going to use a traditional drywall primer. You don't need anything special for fresh drywall. So just a standard PVA, or Sherwin-Williams actually makes an actual drywall primer. So you don't have to spend expensive primer or anything for going over this. And I just like to use a 3/8 inch nap roller for this. And yeah, just a matter of eliminating any lines and just covering everything. Now the primer coat is going to possibly uncover some areas that you might have to touch up with your drywall mud. It's always tough to tell until you get some kind of finished coat on here, whether you need to touch up any nicks and dashes anywhere. Okay, so for your caulking against your tile and the ceiling and the edges here, I really like using Sherwin-Williams 1050 QD. The QD is made for quick dry. And this is a siliconized acrylic. So the siliconized part of it is what really makes it last, and that's why I like to use it. And the acrylic allows me to paint it. So I would definitely recommend using a siliconized acrylic caulk for your ceiling joint and against your tile. All right, so for the ceilings, I really like this Master Hide. It's just a flat white ceiling paint, but I mean, man, it is some of the flattest white that I've ever seen. So if you have any imperfections on the ceiling, you almost can't even see it because it's so flat. But it's just a preference to do flat on the ceiling. I think most people usually have flat white ceiling paint. But the stuff isn't really expensive. This is from Sherwin-Williams, and ever since I've been using it, I just use it on all my ceilings. Okay, so these angled brushes are usually the best type to use because you can really get up into the corner. And my suggestion is just to use as long, straight, continuous motions with your brush stroke. So it's going to give you the best ability for the corners. So you just want to use like long, continuous motions, and that'll give you a nice straight line up at your ceiling. And really, like, any taping, anything like that, it's not going to really help you, especially if you're trying to do this all in the same day. If you try to tape that ceiling right now, it's just going to pull that paint right off. And if there's any real humidity, you can pretty much count on that coming off. So cutting in by hand is really the best way, and then just using continuous strokes and motions.